Go
Awesome.
ahead, Josh.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Joel, for suggesting I come on. So I'm Josh Grose. I work at a company called Common Room, but my background has been in product management, go-to-market, and now heavily in community. And what I started to do when I got to Common Room, we're a platform that helps with tracking your community. So understanding who's engaging in your Slack, LinkedIn, GitHubs, et cetera, et cetera. But what happened was as we started running our software with companies, they were all having conferences. And once I started to look at like what was actually happening in these digital channels during these conferences, I was like, there's so much dang value in the conversations that are happening, because every conference went like virtual or at least hybrid still today. And so people are always commenting somewhere out there about an announcement during a conference or something they like, or they may be criticizing, or you just never know. But each of these interactions can have significant value to someone in a company. When I was like in go-to-market specifically, a conference would mean leads. So it's just badge scans. When I was in product, it was about like meeting with customers there and making sure your demo worked out okay. But the other day, actually it was at AWS reInvent, so not really the other day, I was at like an executive dinner and I was talking to someone that just ran a conference. Well, the CEO of a company that ran a conference. And he told me that like they had originally budgeted $3 million for their annual conference, and they doubled that and they didn't realize it was going to cost double that until like a week prior. And I asked him, I was like, did you think you got the value for what you spent? And he was like, I don't know. And it got me thinking, like, is there a way that you can prove value for a conference or an event outside of just like sponsorships or attendance or lead scans? And so I started looking at the data and the conversations, and that's what got me thinking about like, could we start doing these event recaps? And yes, I do use Common Room for this, but really it's more about just thinking about like when an event happens and whether you're responsible just for your like customer advocates or your social media or whatever, how can I use that data to tell a narrative and to get it to the right people so that we can actually understand how big of a splash did we make? Was this a good investment? Because after doing probably over a dozen of these, I've seen events just like completely suck in terms of like you see there's no digital, like there's no connection between that. There was really an event happening and the buzz across all these channels. And like that's super worrisome if you're a VP of marketing or in charge of that. And I've also seen where like, if you look at like the booths at many of these conferences, like say you're a Datadog and you go and present, or like you buy the biggest booth at AWS reInvent, like it's going to cost you $400,000 at least for that event. And then what did you actually get for it? Well, typically we don't see any uptick in the social and the digital channels. And like, so it's like, you're really getting lead scan, you know, you're creating awareness, but just be aware that the investment you're making, you're much better off just doing your own conference, which clearly sounds simpler than it is, but just knowing that like the dollars that you're spending there could be used elsewhere. And so for today, like if you want, I can show you what I've presented and the data that we pulled, but honestly, like it's more around like, what is the story you want to tell and who are the stakeholders that you want to engage with? And so I'll show you the template that I created. And I started doing these because one, like if we had a company that hooked up their socials and these various channels, like I've seen some companies that do a phenomenal job. Like there's a B2B tech company called Kamunda, and they actually create a call to action to join like their Slack workspace and engage in the conference channel during their events. Well, like the thing that a lot of companies don't think about is they like set up, say, hashtags, or they set like for the event for Twitter. They post on LinkedIn, all that's ready. But if people actually want to have a conversation that aren't at the event, so they're only attending digitally, where does that happen? Most companies never actually think about that, but they usually already have some type of Slack or some other community. And so after seeing data like this, it makes me think like there needs to like be some call to action for the digital aspect of an event because it's always streamed. Recently, I got to run these for both Databricks and Snowflake, two of our customers, because they had their conferences, their big time competitors, the same week last month, and huge announcements. Like Snowflake announced partnerships with NVIDIA, Databricks announced a purchase of Mosaic ML for over $1 billion. And if you're those companies, you want to know like which accounts and which people are advocating or participating in these conversations, because for your GTM, so for your sales teams or your product marketing or anything like that, those are people that they should go and educate on what this means for their business and have a new conversation with these stakeholders. And so the areas that like I focused, and I've seen customers take these and do it elsewhere, but it's like just understanding, usually when we see like conference reports, it might be impressions or how much organic like publications did we get, PR and so forth. I'm looking more for the intent channels, like again, like Slacks, LinkedIn's and socials, but even like GitHub's, forums, anywhere there where you could see a potential buzz. It could be Reddit as well. And so the things that we want to measure is like, did we make a buzz? So just like those very like vanity metrics. So how many more interactions, activities did you have? Then you get into stuff like positive sentiment. Was that buzz generally positive? And how did that compare to previous periods? The stuff that gets even more interesting is, did we hit our target demographic? So like the companies that are in our ideal customer profile, or the personas, were they the ones that were engaging with us? Did our team participate? So meaning like the people, our employees, did they also amplify the conversation during the event? Did we get more new people engaging than we ever had before? And then also, I really like to focus on a lot of the more mature companies, and I would imagine most of yours have like ambassador and champion programs. What did they do during it? Because these are the most outspoken folks, and were they more engaged? And did they help amplify that message? And then from there, we get into like the specific, like, who is it? How did it change? What were some of the comments? I also like to look at via like keywords. I want to know if there was an announcement around a new product. So like those NVIDIA or the Mosaic ML, like which of the announcements actually stuck? Because if you think from a product management perspective, then you're like, okay, we just announced it. Usually it's not released yet. Usually it's beta. Who are those beta customers that we should invite on? Well, now we have a list of all these people that have expressed interest in it, whether in social or somewhere. Let's go see if we have engagements with those accounts and we can get right to them. Because in big companies, as you're aware, especially if you've done like customer marketing and you've done case studies and all that, getting access to those stories is hard. Just like getting access to actual users is hard for product. And so it's happening organically. So I feel like by doing stuff like this, it creates more longevity and value from that single event versus that one time, hey, we did it. It was great. We had a bunch of, like, we sold out our tickets. We had these sponsors, and now like get it over to the SDRs. I think that is a huge miss because of just now having a more qualitative understanding of what can occur online during these events. There's just too much good stuff there. So I'll pause and answer questions. Like clearly it's hard to do this without technologies, and I'd be remiss to say it, but it's also like there's so much dang value in understanding the who's talking about you during these events, what they're talking about, and making sure that the teams that are most interested have awareness of that data. And I feel like the teams running the events, whether it's customer marketing, field events, and so forth, they're the ones that if they can package this up, it's going to give visibility at all levels for them as well. And it'll make it so like more teams want to participate. I thought Snowflake, their community team just crushed it at the event. Like they were featured on one of the keynotes. They had like an ambassador, essentially is the data superheroes. They had a whole setup at the event just for talks from them and lounges. And so it like they were prominently featured everywhere. And when you have the support of your organization to do that, you're just going to get this huge flywheel that happens from investing there. I did build like a how do you do it and how we think about it. But again, it's tied more to our product. So I don't know if it's that relevant, but the idea is more so is like, what are other ways that we can understand the value of the events we host? And like Snowflake, after like running one of like just participating in this type of activity, they're like, we should be doing this for all of our like build events and this event and this, just to see like what the conversation is after. And that's the fire that I just love to see, is that inspiration on like there's so much more that we can understand about our customers and do with them because of all this context.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Joel, did you have specific things that you wanted to point out or ask questions about?
Um, I guess like my first thing that I thought was really interesting was really around the idea of like advocates and digging into that. Because especially for CMA, like weekly being hyper focused on customer marketing and advocacy, I think that that would be a super interesting area, Josh, if you could like dive into whether it's the like what are they doing during the event, either like in other spaces talking about it, or also if they're speaking like tracking how their tracks are like being talked about and sharing that back too.
Yeah. So is it, I actually, after I saw Snowflake's event, I reached out to the community team. I was like, hey, can we do a webinar on how you prepared for the event? Because there was so much intention that went into it. And so hopefully we get through PR and improve to do it like in late August or early September. But so on the advocacy side, what like Snowflake, what I've seen from them or observed is they're very good at one, they make sure to like lift up or raise up all their advocates. So they're always using any of their social reach to help build the personal brands of these. But in return, they ask a lot of them. So they blog on Medium, and they prepare them with all the social handles. They do all of that stuff. But then at the event, and they still, I believe, fly out a lot of their ambassadors, which some companies can do, some can't. But at the event, like it was a completely tailored experience where the executives are coming and taking pictures with all the data superheroes. They have a lounge. They have a like the session track given by data superheroes all happened in the same place. And so it was very much that they were front and center. And then, of course, like acknowledging them during the keynotes. But really, they made it that like about them. And when I was at Splunk previously, and we had the Splunk Trust, and that was one of like the first times I had really seen the value of like an ambassador program. And there, you'd be at the .conf event, which was the annual conference, and people would wear their fezzes everywhere because that was like the signal that you were somebody that had been recognized. And it was super exclusive. Now on the, so in terms of like tracking that advocacy, what we're seeing is like, okay, you asked them to do it, did they actually do it? So you asked them to amplify, did they do it? And then that demonstrates to your social media teams and these others the value that they're having. Other things that I've seen that they do, although it's not as much related to events, but like if you look at data superheroes, many of them have it right bold in their headline on LinkedIn. They may even have avatars with capes on. And so there's such a level of pride that they've been able to create through having such an investment and intention around them.
That's a good point. Looking at all of this information to be able to go back and find the advocates that are doing things, but also potential advocates for the future, I think could be very helpful, especially, I mean, when I'm thinking about ROI as far as like finding new advocates, a lot of it kind of goes to finding those references to support sales because that's the fastest way. But being able to find more advocates for other activities is really helpful too. So I tend to talk more about community when I suggest like going and looking for advocates, because I think community is a great place to find those stories and be able to quickly nurture them into doing more advocacy. But the events online and offline are great. The ones that are online, you can see a lot of it in chats and things like that, um, which I think all goes to waste. But I may have missed if you were saying that there's a way to catch all of that with Common Room.
Yeah, so we capture all the history, like the conversation. So, like for instance, in the example of how to use an event to find new advocates. So when we think about it, it's like, what type of advocates do we want? Is it like companies that work with, or people that work at these type of companies, the size, industry, etc.? Is it influencers, so people that have large followings? Like, what is the program about, and where do we see the gaps? And so by polling, like by being able to see all that data. So on Twitter, it's like if somebody says, hey, that was a really smart acquisition, or love NVIDIA and Snowflake, and they're an influencer with 10,000 followers in B2B tech, like you're one DM away or one amplification of their message away from actually starting a conversation and pulling them in closer. And those are like the concepts that many of you already know from community, but literally that one-to-one, just acknowledging, that's how they actually start to enter. They may already have affinity for the brand or awareness, but the reason I feel like events are so special is because people naturally just speak up when they normally wouldn't do that. And so you get the context of what do they care about? Why are they like associating themselves with this at this point in time? And now it's about how do we engage in a timely manner with it so that we can actually generate some additional momentum from it. And so for advocacy, it's huge because I think with Snowflake, we had 3x the number of like interactions in that 1 week compared to a previous week. And so you can imagine if you have nearly 10,000 people engaging with your LinkedIn, your Twitter, they don't even really have like a Slack. And so most of it was all happening in social. It's like, what can we learn from all these people? What are they talking about? What is the significance to the brand and the direction we want to go? And could they potentially support it? It's huge.
Yeah, that's a good point. Now, so with Common Room, are you talking about, this must be a paid version, right?
Not really. So you can pipe in like your Slack, your Twitter. LinkedIn does cost money to pipe in. But you can do a lot of it with the free plans. It's just a lot of the stuff that like we're understanding product appreciation, or if they're asking questions and stuff like that, that's paid, but you can do keyword search. So if you have an announcement and you're pulling in this data, then you can search like, we had this announcement, who all talked about it? That alone is valuable. And then we will identify accounts up to a certain number that people belong to, so you understand like the commercial significance of who these people are.
Right. Okay.
Threads does not have an API yet, so unfortunately, no.
Do we have any other questions, anyone?
I don't have the question. I was just going to make a comment because you were talking about the high volume, and I saw that when we were at Terry, that like doing our face-to-face events was my absolute favorite thing to do, because we would see 25% of the volume of our activities done in those 4 days. And we did a great job of like capturing the data, the ROI around it, every sales meeting that took place in that event. With one of our advocates in our program, we tracked that revenue closed, and we were fortunate enough to have a wonderful person on our marketing ops team who worked closely with our program to say, okay, when we were at those events, like 47% of the deals closed within 3 months because of those meetings that took place, which helped elevate our program, the budget, the staffing, and then also just that space, because conference space is expensive. And we had a room of like 25 breakout rooms and kind of a lounge in the middle for our advocates to make them feel special when they came in the room, but also because often at conferences, you know, when you work with the events team sometime, they don't see your program as like top of mind, they don't allocate enough space. So the important thing is, though, you don't want your people, your advocates who are doing all these meetings to have to run around the building, go floor to floor. So we kind of branded the space Terry to everyone for like 3 years in a row, decals on the floor to get there, on the, you know, poles, everything. So they knew if they had a meeting with a customer, prospect, analyst, or media, it was in this one room, and we worked collaboratively with the media team and the analysts to plan that. So that really helped, you know, build that momentum. So obviously COVID happened and that kind of squandered for a bit. And now the day-to-day events are like 1 days, but hopefully they'll go back to more. I don't think anything can replace the, you know, the 2 or 3 day conferences. I think our users still love to see that.
Yeah, no, well, it seems like because one of the things like we're passionate about is understanding like the ROI of community, like in the different ways that you can measure it. But it's rare that you see like that sophistication in measuring ROI. And so what's interesting though is like, so once you have that proof point, there's investment in future events, but usually it's like attendance, and then you get those lagging indicators of like, did they buy and what was the sales cycle compared to others? And usually there's all this stuff in between, which I feel like this kind of data helps fill the gap in terms of continuing to drive momentum. But yeah, it pains me when I see how expensive an event is and it ends up being a one-time lead gen machine. It's just like, no, like there's so much energy there.
You know, the overall like corporate events person would come to me every year when she had to justify the expenses and pull like data from our team saying this is how many deals we closed, how many interactions took place, here's the quotes from the customers, the sales, you know. And so I love to pull that presentation for her, and typically we pulled it together within a week of the conference event anyway, because we wanted to elevate it up. Unfortunately, our LT loved that as well, and lots of pictures, you know, group events, customers. 1 year we had in the community space, we have what we call, you know, Terra Tap, which was a keg of beer, and that just gathered people into networking more. And so, you know, as many kind of what I call bring it to life is really good.
Amazing. Does anybody else have any event stories or attribution?
I do not. You know, until Joel brought this up to me, I think what I've looked at is kind of like lists of who's come to events, who, like comparing those customers to customers that are already in advocacy programs or have done reviews or references or case studies, and then kind of doing more of almost like an account-based marketing into really looking at all of that data and comparing things as much as I could to come up with groups of people to reach out to and, you know, see if I could find more opportunities for advocates there. But this does seem like an interesting approach to making that happen. So with the template though, how did you get to the ROI that you were kind of suggesting that the event was creating?
So it's not a fixed like dollar amount, because you need like the inputs and you need to know like, so for instance, advocacy, like what is one advocate worth? If we were able to recruit 10 more advocates, like theoretically, those are ways that you would truly prove an ROI. It's more of a conceptual like return on investment on like, if I am responsible for X or Y, whether it's this product or again, like an advocacy program, like how can I use this event to fulfill something that I have to do too? And so it's more about like, how are we making sure that we're fueling all these other aspects of the business with this, and demonstrated like that this did make a big impact because the baseline is much lower.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's great. It's good if you do have an executive briefing center too, and those advocates are speaking at that to influence, or if they're actually going through it themselves as a, like they're requesting the EBC, to get like what the expansion amount is or that dollar amount if that deal closed, because we actually factored that in. That was another part of my overall team, not directly related to like our peer advantage program other than like the advocate, but it really helped again justify kind of the investment in revitalizing the EBC center as well.
So what size companies would you suggest this kind of approach to?
Honestly, like it's not a huge, well, so you have to be hosting your own event, your own conference, I feel like. We're gonna test it with like say companies that run their like local one-day events to see. And I think it'll be interesting to measure what the attendees of those events do across these digital channels as well. And to be aware of it so you can amplify it and so just build off of it. But if you're having an annual conference and you already have a social media presence and maybe a community, then like I would do it, because it's like worst case scenario is like now you know for next time you have a baseline of what you did this year, and maybe next year you compare it to it. Or at least now you have that like Rolodex of individuals that are participating. Are they related to any of our commercial engagements or anything like that? Maybe we can do a comparison. There's just like, it's kind of one of those things where you measure it because you probably are going to want to use it at some point. But like social media, one thing that I learned actually more recently is because I didn't really like, I'm more in community and it's like community versus audience and all this stuff. But one thing I realized, social media, one of the things they've lacked is they really want to understand, are they hitting the right personas and the companies and all that? And they've never really been able to tell, because a lot of the tools out there tell you impressions and locations and word clouds and stuff like that. And so everybody is hungry to know that like what they're doing is working. Like if I ship a product and announcement or make an announcement at an event, I want to know that people are excited, because like we just worked our tail off to make it to this event. And so I would say any company, especially like B2B, from the advocacy standpoint, one thing that I would look at, if clearly nobody has bandwidth to do everything, but one thing that I learned getting in this space too was a lot of like social proof comes just from helping people build their brands. Like Joel is a great example of this right now. Is like Joel is in all of these outlets. Now, say Joel works at Common Room. If every time Joel posts a blog about like community management or customer advocacy or anything like that, now Common Room would be associated with the brand that published that content. And now you get social proof. And so especially if you're early on starting and you have people like that are passively like engaging during the event or saying, this is really cool. Now you know that this is a persona that would be interested in your technology. Even if they're not a customer today, why don't we feature them to talk about industry related stuff? And then you get more of a different set of type of content and advocates, but you also get associated with the brand that that person belongs to, and you've elevated their personal brand. And so it's really a win-win. And so like, depending on like where you are in your advocacy programs, this is another way to say, okay, we don't have a lot of users yet, perhaps in our core or target ideal customer, but can we have conversations with people that work at these companies? They're experts in their area, and then we're loosely associated with their brand at the same time. Their brand meaning the company they work for. And so I see that as another really strong way, especially if you're earlier on in your like social proof.
Yeah, I'm excited to hear that Common Room is putting so much thought and energy into seeing how communities can contribute to this advocacy and customer marketing world. That for me, I've been doing a lot of talking about communities in this space. So it's nice to see that and, see where else you all move as far as like education around this and things like that.
Yeah. Well, thanks everyone for the questions and for having me.
Yeah, no problem. Does anybody have any more questions for Josh before we switch topics or anything?
I'll jump in and say like I really think it's interesting also specifically like user conferences, if that's kind of like the a lane of focus, for example, for using like this type of template, how it's not just like customer advocates always in terms of like people who want to participate in case studies, but if you also find like end users or admins too through them, who are excited, they can also be brought into like product advisory councils. And you can then, especially through like Common Room, see like, or some others, like see their activity across different spaces, as well as like if you connect Salesforce and or like other business systems into it, you can then also see like the dollar values and like segments of the account and like what that represents too. So you could like build a product advisory council for future development in a product through like where your people like where people are actively contributing to and like what they're saying and where they're saying like that they're excited about, and actually giving them something like behind the scenes that's more or less like free to give, but makes them feel so special because you're bringing them along for the ride. I know like some companies do actually like feature names based on people's like requests for that feature as part of the actual launch. And like product advisory councils, I think are pretty cool, and they're different from like a cab because they're so focused on like the product, whereas cabs are more sometimes like directionality, but also like more like where things are going in the market and like trends, whereas like end users can be super different and super valuable for like product too. So it could be like an interesting use or like tie between customer marketing and advocacy into product, not always just customer marketing and advocacy into like sales or marketing inbound, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I've been thinking a lot lately about the overlaps of all of these post-sales kind of functions in companies, customer success and customer education, customer advocacy and marketing. Um, they all kind of have so much overlap in that we're trying to best understand and use the information we get from customers, get more of that information, and then get it back into the company, into the right places. And it's fun and exciting to see that. I don't know if it's a shift so much as it's been there, and there have been more people over the years doing it, but really getting that done well seems to be hit or miss. Kind of just like community. There's a lot of companies that will try community, and if they get it great. If they don't, they just don't. Um, and so it's interesting to see all of this evolve. So thank you both for bringing it up. I'm sure as we talk more about it in the future, community and events and advocacy and such, we'll get more people that'll come back to this recording to take a listen and see what Common Room does, which I've used Common Room for this community, I think right from the start, actually, because it has a free level. And I've played with a couple others as well, but I just liked Common Room myself, and it works with Slack. It did work with Twitter. I don't know if it does anymore. Because
We ponied up. We ponied up.
but it's helpful to see, what people are talking about, um, who new users are, all of those things. So if you're doing a Slack community, it's one of those things that'll actually help you see kind of what's going on in that community, where before you couldn't do those things. But that we still have a good 18 minutes left in today's call. Does anyone have something else that they'd like to talk about or bring up? It's been a while since we've had open discussion. I know somebody does. Okay, I will pick on someone.
I,
Ari, what's going on?
I will give a shameless plug. Next Tuesday, we are doing, I've teamed up with Chris Shembra. I did a podcast with him, and I realized in the middle of the podcast, he talks about gratitude, human connection, empathy, but not from the way that we talk about it, but from the research side. He's, delved into the psychology and the research behind how does gratitude actually increase human connectivity? How does it improve business results and KPIs and create that stickiness with your customers where they become forever customers? So during our podcast, he was throwing out some stuff, and I was like, wow, this guy, he really knows there's research. And so I contacted him after, and I said, I'd love to do podcasts, not about me, but about the work that you've done and the research that you've shown and what you've uncovered dealing with all these businesses and Google and all of these different things. He's a best-selling author. He's done a lot of work. He works with Harvard Business Review. And so we're going to have him on. And this is a different type of webinar. It is not like our normal KPI, how do we do better case studies? Not that those aren't great, but this is really something that touches me a little more, which is the human connectivity side of it. And how do we tap into that? And what are the actionable things that we can put into practice to actually display gratitude in the language our customers are used to? And so we're doing this webinar. I just went through the rehearsal earlier today. He has packed in so much. I'm basically going to sit there and sprinkle color, but he's just going to talk. And it's a lot of good stuff. So if you want to join, I'll throw a link in the comments to the landing page if you want to come do it, or sign up just to watch the recording, whatever you want. But it's going to be fun. And I'm excited because I've never, ever done a webinar like this. So, and a little background information. A year ago with the top 100 winners, we had him do a gratitude session. I'd say 60% of the people cried in it. I was bawling in it because it just tapped into like this part of me that, you kind of bury sometimes. And so and he's going to do some exercises during the call. So it's just a feel good thing that also has business implications. So that's it. That's my pitch.
I knew I recognized his name. I was in that session with you, Ari, and I was a crier in that one.
Yeah. Wasn't it amazing?
It was amazing.
He flies all around coaching companies on how to do this stuff. So we're getting him to do it for free. So it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. I got the emails from Influitive about it, but I was like, oh yeah, another person talking about empathy. And I'm not saying that to be rude. I love empathy. Like I have what I think is a great deal of empathy, and I think it's super important for community and all of these people all of us talking about customers, working with customers. But are you coming on and sharing that? And I think just your excitement in it and a little bit more information. It's just so different when you have that personal connection to someone and they're sharing something like this. So I'm excited. Yeah, I'll definitely sign up for it now.
I put it in on your Slack. Did I put it in the general? I think so, or no, open share.
Yes, it's just different, isn't it? Everybody on here knows if you get a message, a little bit of a promotional message, which I'm not saying this is, but in a Slack message or something that goes out to everyone, you don't give it the same attention and response as when you get someone coming on and saying, hey, here's all of these things. And so think about that, because that's often, the 911 response where you say, hey, everyone, this is going on. And people are like, cool, good for you. But if you say, hey, Mary, you need to sign up for this, then I'm going to be more specific about taking a look.
I totally get. There's about 350 people already registered. So it's going to be a fun one. He's amazing. I really like him. I have like a man crush on him. So
it's going to be a fun one. The last time he made everyone cry, but it'll be fun, guys. You should totally go.
It's the good type of crying, not the bad type. There's all kinds of crying, Mary. All kinds.
I know.
He taps into it, and every time we're on a call, he asks really deep, like pertinent questions, and he just catches you off guard because you're not expecting to like look in and understand like why did you say it like that? And what do you think? What are you pulling on? You're just like, oh my God, I don't know, where am I pulling this from? Why did I say it like that?
Ari, I feel like you've created a new KPI of CPM, which is cries per thousand.
Oh, I like that. I thought it was gonna be cries per minute.
Well, that too, I suppose.
Well, that's good. I'm gonna get on that one. I think I just registered, but I didn't even look at when it is.
Next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific.
Okay.
Okay.
What else is everyone up to? Bye, Christine, unless you're already gone.
Hi, Christine.
Did everyone see the buying the B2B buyer report from Trust Radius? Any thoughts on that? I thought it was pretty interesting. I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now because it was a couple of weeks ago, but I meant to reach out to them and say that I thought it was interesting just to see, obviously their perspective is they want to show that people are kind of relying on each other to make these decisions. Yeah, I'll find it. I can't talk at the same time, so if somebody else wants to talk about it, go ahead.
I will no comment on it.
Oh no.
No. There's just a lot in there. And I think that we all have our cohorts that we interview during our surveys. And so those people that we're interviewing, obviously, everything always comes with its inherent bias, right? Everything.
Yes.
From every company, including us, right? That's just the nature of the beast and the nature of our own customers and who's filling out the surveys. So
Good point.
conference season, Daniel's got a question.
Go for it.
CMA in Oakland. I'm going. I'll be there. We are not sponsoring it, but I will be there.
Awesome. I got a fun ice cream place to take you to, Ari.
Yeah, let's hang out. I'm also going to XCon because that's I'm not gonna lie, that's my favorite, but also that's a no comment from me. That's not on the record. You can delete that one.
I went to Customer XCon last year for the first time, but I was like standing in the hotel the first night waiting to go up to my room, just checked in, and I hear Ari come in. I can hear his voice. I've heard him before, and I've seen him on webinars, and I'm like, the man, the myth, and the legend. Very identifiable voice.
What's that?
He has a very distinctive voice.
Very creepy.
Yes.
Very creepy.
It'd be a
It's
horrible
not
ninja.
creepy.
Especially late night in the hotel hallway. It's a very creepy voice. Steer far clear from it.
No, it's a little like low voice. But I think I said last week, I have most of your voices. I can tell your voice just from a recording now because of all these calls we've had over the past year plus. I just get on and have to assign the name to like the transcript or something. And I'm like, oh, I know this voice. I know this voice. I know this voice. But I feel like I have all these friends in customer marketing now that I've never even met in real life.
And then you hear the one that sounds like a Muppet, and you're like, oh, that's Lauren.
No, I just know that you're going to be fun. Okay. Yep, Daniel's going to be at both. He loves traveling, so he likes to go to those. I don't know yet if I'm going to either. Probably definitely not Oakland. I can't see myself flying out to the other side of the country. But I'm only 5 hours from Boston, so I'm hoping I can make that work to meet everyone and have a lot of fun. You need your hotel status. What's that mean?
Dan, do you have points that you need to accrue or something?
Yeah, I just need to keep getting nights, right? You gotta get a certain night amount of nights stayed at a hotel chain in order to keep your status for a year. I'm working my way up towards. Well, I think I already got gold status for this year, but if I get to another level of platinum status, I'm like 1 year away from getting, and a whole bunch of nights from getting like lifetime platinum status. So I'm working my way up.
Wow.
Nice.
I may have traveled a lot for my last job, like too much, but it worked out all right.
Nice. I don't travel a lot, but if I did go, I would probably bring my husband and he would just stay in the hotel all day, relaxing with no children. So, and he would love every minute of it. We love our kids, but he's the one that watches them while I work. So he's ready for a break from the summer. They've been out for about a month now. Let's see. I don't know what else we have going on. I know that I'm going to be planning on like us sharing some tech stacks. So if you have a tech stack you want to share, or even some features or anything like that, it's definitely something more people are looking at. I did see this week that tech layoffs has been slowing down since the beginning of the year. TechCrunch says that like last month there were 20,000 compared to closer to a couple 100,000 in January. So I'm hoping that means that at some point we are going to see some turnaround in customer marketing work, because yeah, it's super needed for a lot of the SaaS companies anyways. And I don't think that people are going to stop asking for referrals or references, and more information from actual customers or people that like a brand. So that's my hope. I don't have any other news to really share this week, but yeah, if no one else has anything, let's see. Speaking of travel, sorry. If anyone's in London in November, let Daniel know. He is having a conference, and oh, he's going to spend some time over there in London. I think we do have some people from London in the community. And Caitlin is talking about she lost her gold status. Oh no.
Yeah. As
Yeah.
this next trip I take will be my first one without it in like 6 years. So it's
Wow.
a day for me traveling like a normal person. But that's a pro tip, Lauren. I never thought to put something like that on a credit card to earn that status. I like it.
Us normal people aren't so bad.
Honestly, it's been nice. I used to work in college admissions, so I was traveling a lot. And then when I pivoted into tech, I was based on the East Coast, but our office was actually in Oakland. So I was racking up miles traveling back and forth there. But now I've just been home, which has been nice, but also, yeah, it went to my head. I don't know what it's going to feel like.
Lounge life can go to your head. Yeah, I thought for a second, I thought you were saying lounging, like lounging at home. I'm like, yeah, for sure. I love lounging at home, but that's not what you meant. Like, that's the problem. I do like lounge life. I like being at home, so I don't travel a lot. But I'll get there someday. All right. Well, hop into the community, say hi during the week. I'm working on some programs that I can't quite announce yet, but I think you'll all love them. And I should be able to say something in a couple of weeks. And yeah, see you next week. Enjoy vacations if you're going on vacations. And I will share a topic for next week soon. Have a good week.
Thank you, Mary.
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Have a good weekend.
You do.